All right.
Hey, joining us now is this future chief of staff for President-elect Trump, Reince Priebus, joining us from Trump Tower.
And the first question we have for you, Joy Behar wants him to step down. Do you think he will? Will he listen to her?
I think he's putting together one of the greatest cabinets that an administration has seen in a very long time. He's doing great. He's enjoying it, and it's also a lot of work. And I think a lot of people are very proud of what's happening here in New York, and can't wait to bring it back to Washington D.C. and get started.
Well, the big name today is Rex Tillerson, the CEO of ExxonMobil. It sounds like is going to be his official nomination. Why is that guy getting the job and not Mitt, not Rudy, not Corker, not any of those other guys?
Well, I mean, first of all, it starts with a vision. It starts with chemistry. It starts with how all of that will be implemented. So, look, I think it's very clear that this was a pick that President-elect Trump took a long time to make, but also a deliberative amount of time to make. And look at the people he brought in and talked to. He talked to John Bolton. He talked to Mitt Romney, Rudy Giuliani, David Petraeus, and so many others. But at the end, it was Rex Tillerson. Right. Sort of the business, but also the vision, and also the fact that Rex Tillerson has maintained these relationships across the world through many administrations, both Republicans and Democrats. And at the end of the day, it's putting America first, and Donald Trump and Rex Tillerson had a connection on that issue, and we're excited about today and what Rex Tillerson's going to bring to the table.
We know that he could get a great table in Yemen. He'll know the best restaurants. He is that connected to some of the worst spots in the world that happen to have oil. The question is, can he put America where Exxon was? Can he understand America's policies and not go for the dollar, but go for the diplomacy?
Well, I think, as we all know, the good Lord didn't put oil in all freedom-loving democracies across the world. So that requires someone at the top of the to say, look, we're going to have relationships with people that may not always be the folks that are the greatest people in the world, but people that I have to get along with. In order to have world peace, in order to have peace in the Middle East, you know that you have to be able to bring people to the table that might not always like each other, but you have somebody that's capable of doing that. And so having relationships with people that would otherwise not be the first people you'd invite to your party might actually be beneficial to putting America first, and that's what Rex Tillerson and President-elect Trump want to do.
And what Senator McCain and Senator Menendez have had problems with is because he got the friendship award from Vladimir Putin that many people view as he's been absolutely aggressive against the U.S. for the last 8 years. Can somebody who has a friendship plaque in his office be tough on Vladimir Putin?
Well, Rex Tillerson's a really tough guy, and you know what? Athletes, astronauts, musicians, other Americans, Canadians, a lot of folks have gotten this award. But the truth is that having relationships with people is not a bad thing. I don't know how we got to the place where having an actual functional relationship with someone who might not be a person that we'd first think of to have that relationship is suddenly a bad thing. I mean, we have a lot of problems in this world, and we're not going to solve those problems by making believe that people don't exist. And so, America first. That's what President-elect Trump lives by every day. That's what's in his head every day. Americans first, America first. We're going to be tough across the world. And President-elect Trump and Rex Tillerson and Vice President-elect Pence are going to take every day with that mindset in place.
What about Secretary of Energy? Let's talk about that this morning. Rick Perry was named as the Secretary of Energy. Why did you guys choose him?
Well, that hasn't been formally announced, and so that may happen later in the week, but
CBS
we're not ready to announce that. Well, CBS can report what they want to report.
Not official until Donald Trump announces it.
It has not been official.
All right, so if you do choose him, or maybe why is he on the list?
That's a better way to do it, Ainsley. If we did... no, I would just say, obviously, we've got a 14-year governor of Texas that I think people know across the country as being a great advocate and leader. He's managed one of the biggest states in the country, but not just that, but one of the biggest economies in the world. And so leading up to Department of Energy is something that he could do very well. We have a lot of confidence in Governor Perry. He's a great friend, but obviously it's not a done deal yet, but certainly he's extraordinary.
It's not a done deal yet. He's not president of the United States. And yet, I'm sure you saw yesterday, Reince, the legacy media, going crazy over the fact that Donald Trump is not taking the daily presidential briefing every day. Says, you know, there's a lot of information that's all the same. If anything changes, let him know. Here's a soundbite. I want you to listen to this. Here's the president of the United States saying that Mr. Trump is flying blind without it. Listen.
They are full of extraordinarily hardworking, patriotic, and knowledgeable experts. And if you're not getting their perspective, their detailed perspective, then you are flying blind.
I believe he didn't take it every day either, but what do you make of his assessment that you're flying blind without the critical assessment of the people in the intel community?
Yeah, but it's just not true. He's doing his intelligence briefings every day, and we do the presidential briefing. I think this week we'll have 3 presidential briefings in the 5 days. I mean, this is a little bit ridiculous and over the top. Look, he's very prepared. We spend all day, every day, in his office, every half an hour meeting with someone different, whether it be about world affairs, whether it be domestic issues, interviews for cabinet positions. Yesterday he spoke with President Obama as well for quite a long time, talking about a number of issues. So, I mean, this is just a little bit, you know, look, people are slicing and dicing right now, and it's December, it's 10 days before Christmas, it's interesting, and everything's Donald Trump all the time, but that's okay, because he's ready, we're excited, and he's doing a fantastic job.
All right, now let's talk about what's not going to happen, and that is a Donald Trump press conference to describe how he's going to disentangle himself from his business. What we do know is that he said Eric and Don Jr. will not add to the business. They'll maintenance the properties that they have, and it looks like Ivanka and Jared will be playing a role in the administration. But we didn't get the press conference we thought we were getting. What happened?
Well, first of all, you're going to get it, and we're going to do it right after Christmas, after the first of the year. But can we just back up a second? And I think you all know this. I mean, we have a person that's built one of the most successful retail companies in the entire world. I mean, no one didn't believe when they went to the polls that the Trump brand, the product, the hotels, the golf course, all of it wasn't something that was real and was something that wasn't going to be cut off instantly right after the election. This isn't easy stuff. And so what President-elect Trump is doing with a lot of lawyers and a lot of people involved is just making sure that all government ethics are followed, that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and he's going to make sure that nothing is compromised. And so that's all this is, and it's just going to take a little time, but we're going to get it right.
Reince, would you say I'm accurate in that description, that Don Jr. and Eric stay in New York, run the companies, don't buy anything else, they just maintenance those accounts, and Ivanka will be playing some type of role in the administration?
Listen, part of that is true, but perhaps not all of it, and I'm not prepared now to slice and dice it with you, although I do like you a lot, Brian. It's not something that I'm going to do right now. But what I will say is that just like what we talked about earlier about Rex Tillerson, it's America first, Americans first, and we don't want to have any issues like this moving forward after January 20th. So it's going to take time, and I can just assure you and the rest of the American people that President-elect Trump is going to do everything properly.
Reince, what can we expect tonight? He's going to Wisconsin to thank the voters there who helped him get elected.
Well, I might see my house today. That would be an interesting sight. But no, I'm looking forward to it. It's a thank you event in Wisconsin. You're going to see, obviously, Scott Walker, Paul Ryan, and other David Clark and others there that are excited to meet him back. Look, we haven't won Wisconsin since 1984, and we have a candidate that was very uniquely situated to win. And I don't think anyone else could have won Wisconsin but Donald Trump. And so he did it, and people love him there, and we can't wait to see everybody.
Well, it'll be good news that you can actually go and do laundry at your actual house. Reince, before you go, though, what do you make of the legacy media talking about how, you know, the story that the CIA thinks that Russia helped Trump, the FBI says there's no proof, and now the Office of the Director of National Intelligence doesn't see any evidence, and yet legacy media is saying it looks like positively Russia helped Trump win.
Well, first of all, there's two different issues. One is the hacking itself, which we don't like and think is ridiculous, and we need to protect Americans and businesses and entities from hacking. But the second piece, which is terribly offensive, is that somehow Russia helped Donald Trump win. Number one, there's no evidence that the result of whatever anyone did on this hacking actually helped Donald Trump win.
Right.
The reason Donald Trump won was that he swept the country with a message like no one's ever seen. He won because he crushed Hillary Clinton in the debates, especially debate 2 and 3. He won because he was able to resonate throughout the Midwest. He won because Hillary decided to ignore Wisconsin and Michigan. I'm sure the Russians didn't advise her of that. This whole thing is really a play by the liberal media to take away a legitimate electoral landslide from President-elect Trump. But forget about that. We don't care. We're moving forward. We do want to avoid these sorts of situations in the future, but there's no evidence that it actually helped Donald Trump win. He did it. The team did it. And obviously, we're excited about looking forward, not through the rearview mirror, and that's what we're doing every day.
And I'm sure you're going to have a big day today. And well, as you announced, the Secretary of State and maybe the Secretary of Energy. Thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it, Reince Priebus.
Thank you. Have fun at home
Thank you,
today.
everybody.